This is the features video for the 0.15.19 release. Last video I made was like 0.14.15. We've had a lot of bug fixes here I can show you, and we've added a bunch of new features. By the way, if you don't play GURPS online, the Foundry is a fantastic way to play GURPS online. And of course, we are constantly, actively supporting it, listening to the users. Well, so I've got a brand new feature that I think everybody's going to want to use. Well, I know we wanted to use it, and by extension, hopefully that means you do too. Let's get into it. The Effects Modifier window now defaults to being open. It's always on, and you'll see why in a second. You can close it with this button, and there is a system setting if you don't want it at all. Ignore the waitress there. I'm using the patrol module, so she's walking around the tavern. But the Effects Modifier window is always going to be up for a couple of reasons. Well, if you set a status on somebody, let's say this big guard here, and if I say that he is prone, you now see various modifiers that affect him when he's prone. Also, modifiers that are used against him if he's being targeted. And if you have somebody targeted, let's say the guard now targets him. By the way, I use the Smart Target module and change the target indicator because I like this one. It shows up a little bit better. But now when I'm on the guard, you can see the guard himself doesn't have any modifiers, but the big guard does have a modifier for being a target. So that we've always had that functionality, but now we have the functionality that you can add modifiers to this list as a reminder. And this came up in our gaming session because we have a bard that buffs us and also my druid that occasionally casts buffs. And it would be nice if we could have that as a reminder on the character that you have this buff. Now, of course, you can always open up your character sheet and put something here in the quick notes section. So a common one in our game is the bard sings the alarm song and we get +2 damage. So that goes right here, and I can remember that. But if my character sheet is closed, it's harder to find that, so you have to go search for it. Well, you can now just go to your character, so you have your character selected. This, of course, is much more powerful for the GMs, but still works for the players. So the player has their character selected, and you can see up here that because they're targeting the big guard, there's this modifier that they could use. But the pop-up now has a plus sign. They can actually type in something. And so long as it matches up to an on-the-fly modifier, which basically says plus some number, minus some number, then it will appear in the list as a user-created modifier. You can delete all the user-created modifiers by hitting the trash can, or you can just right-click on it. It'll go away. But also, you can take any modifier that you have anywhere. So if I take this modifier, drag it to the chat, I could also, in the chat, I could drag it from the chat into the Effects Modifier window. So if the GM says, hey, you're at a -5 because of whatever, then and puts that in the chat window, you can just drag it from the chat window into the Effects Modifier window, and now you'll have a quickie little reminder of what your modifiers are. By the way, this is all backed up also by the mod command, /mod. You can add any modifier, or you can say mod clear or mod C, and that gets rid of all the modifiers for the selected character. Also, if you build up a modifier bucket of a lot of modifiers, you can see it down here, I'm at -4 because I have 2 different modifiers that are going to be applied to me. You can take this, you can just drag the modifier bucket into the window, and it will create the modifier there. So if I clean up the modifier bucket, it's empty, and you can just go up here and click on that, and it's back in the modifier bucket. Don't worry about the user-created thing. That's just a flag for us to let us know that it's not part of the status one. So the status modifiers will always be there depending on what statuses you have set. Also, we now have modifiers for these bad statuses, the basic abstract difficulty. If you just need to remember, I got a +1 for something, you could just turn on +1, and there's basic abstract difficulty, and now the big guard here has the +1 on them. Or if they need to have a -5, there we go. So now they have a +1 and a -5. And you can just click on these to add them into your modifier bucket for future rolls. And of course, if you have a lot of statuses on a character and you just want to get rid of them, you can, of course, go into the menu here and click all the icons, turn them off, or the easiest way is /st clear. That'll do the status clear, and that clears all the affected statuses. And of course, you can just disable it with this button here, or you can go and change the system setting. It's per client. If you just don't want that window there, you don't need it. But we found a use for it in our last gaming session. There's just so many buffs flying around. You can add it to your modifier bar. You know, I can take this -2 to hit due to enemy spell and drop it down here, but you know, it doesn't show up. You have to mouse over it and, you know, change icon, and it's kind of nice when it's just in the window up here. I can just say, you know what, I need this guard to remember that they're -2 to hit. I'll go drag it on there, and now it's remembered. And one last thing, if you have modifiers on an actor, they now show up in the modifier bucket. So you can see there's a couple of user-created modifiers plus the status modifiers for being in shock and crouching, and in the modifier bucket they appear there as well. By the way, you can drag from the modifier bucket into the effects modifier window. So if you find that you're aiming a lot, you can take aim and drag it up there, and now you have an aim bonus. And it's just a quick way for you to get access to modifiers. When you're done, you can just right click on it and it'll go away. Now, I'm not the UI man that Nick and Neck are. Actually, they're fantastic, and I just barely get by. But it's functional for now. We're not going to make it look any prettier until we get into version 1.0.0. Okay, this next feature affects the sound command, and if you use the JB2A animations, you know that we collect up the list of all the animations, so you can just give a wildcard name and it'll play any animation that matches that, which works out well with them because they provide multiple animations for a single thing, like a quarterstaff hit. Unfortunately, we don't have a way to do that with sound because I just don't know what sound modules you have loaded. So what I've done instead is, if in the sound command you give reference to a text file and not a sound file, we'll read that text file and then randomly pick a sound from that. So what I've done is I've created a directory that just contains sounds that indicate a melee hit. And I found them through lots of various different modules and stuff like that. And you just create a text file with their file names in them. And this is the directory. And then the command looks like this. So Stan is going to attack this guard, and it's an animation where I'm doing a quarterstaff, regular, purple, and then some modifiers to make it look good. And then I'm playing a sound that waits 1.1 seconds, and it's running the one-shot sounds melee hit index.txt, which is that file. So what you get, if we execute this, is the different animations with the different sounds. All right. You may not do that with your game, but I'm trying to impress my nephews, and so this is what I do. So then what I did is I took that animation command and I put it in the during entry, the on-the-fly entry for during, and put the bang in front so it doesn't actually show up in the chat log. So let me clear the chat log. So anytime they do an attack with their fine quarterstaff, they get that. I did the same thing with the dagger. That might be a little bit of strong noise for a dagger hit, but... And to make certain that it survives re-imports, I actually put it in the GCS character. In the VTT notes, you can identify the check, during, pass, or fail on the fly formulas with a D: for during, C for check, P and F for pass and fail. And that way, every time if I have to recreate or re-import Stampedin, I don't lose that graphics command. I just put it here in GCS. Here's the list of bugs that we fixed, but one of the big ones that I just recently fixed was you can drag on-the-fly formulas back into journal pages again. That was broken in the 10 release, and it's now okay. So if your characters are collecting up a bunch of different modifiers, or you want to provide them with a bunch of different on-the-fly formula commands, of course, you can give them a journal sheet that they can edit, but they can do so just by dragging and dropping. So here's a page I've got something in, and he wants to drag this +4 in. So you can just drag that in, and it will append to the bottom of the page. So I can do that again. And then if I go in and edit, you can see the on-the-fly formulas down here at the bottom. So you can drag and drop into journal entries again. And the final few things. Now, when something is rolled in the chat window, it remembers who did it. So this is more for GMs. So Stan is here, and he rolls Perception. Okay, so he is the last actor. But then the GM moves over to a different character, but then you need to re-roll Stan. If I click on this Perception in the chat window, it remembers that this actually came from Stan. So even though Big Guard is the active character, the last actor, if I click here, then it knows that it's Stan, and and Stan fails. It works with skills too. So Big Guard is still the last actor, and Stan's going to roll his longbow. There we go. We added the posture standing because it was necessary if you were using the token action HUD, which I really highly recommend. It's a great way to get access to your character sheets without actually having to open your character sheet. But if somebody has a standing, so we will take all these guys, let's say they get knocked down, and so we'll set them all to prone. Actually, I'll just say ST plus prone. Boom, they're all prone. And I need them to stand back up again. You could go through and try to figure out which posture they have so you could reset it, or you could just do status plus standing, telling them that they are standing, and that will actually remove whatever posture they were and bring them back to standing. And the last thing, we support the Warp Gate module. I highly, highly recommend it. It does much better with animations. Like Stan has this animation, and anytime you have an animation, usually you need a target. So he'll do his quarterstaff animation, and it pops along and it's doing this. So this click to target, and that target thing is being supported by the Warp Gate module. Now, if you have the Warp Gate module, then it'll still work. It'll work the old way, but I really highly recommend this. This works so much nicer. So he's saying, oh, I'm going to click there, and it automatically targets it, and then, of course, allows the animation to complete. So now he has that set as a target, and, of course, then he can keep the attack. And that's it for now. As you see, there's a lot of bug fixes we put in there, and we are still very actively working on version 1.0.0. But I know that a lot of people are still using the 0.15 version. I know we are, because, you know, it's the only one that's available. So when things come up in our game, and I'm just like, man, this would be so useful to have, I take a break from the 1.0.0 programming and add it into the old version, the current version, so we have access to it until we can release 1.0.0. And as always, thank you for watching.